It is leak season for Assassin's Creed, and there's not one but 2 leaks, and they both popped up simultaneously, and they've both gotten some traction. I want to talk about each of them today, as well as a theory that I have for both of them at the end of the video. And yeah, I mean, today is going to be a pretty chill, laid-back discussion type of video. I've even got my cat in my lap here, just recording while she rubs her face on my arm. So we're going to just be really chill about it today. Now, before we start today's video, remember, if you do enjoy, leave a nice, thick, and juicy like as always. And of course, if you want more videos like this one, or if you're waiting on my big Assassin's Creed Valhalla review, as well as the supplementary video that I'm working on for that's kind of about Loki's family and everything, make sure you hit that big red sexy subscribe button right underneath the video. Also, got to shout out my channel members. Thank you guys so much. You help make these videos possible. If you want access to exclusive perks like they have, then make sure you check out the link in the description down below. So the first of these 2 leaks has to do with Assassin's Creed India, and I'm just gonna kind of put the leak on screen. You can read along about it, but I want to talk about some details that seem pretty important and just kind of my overall thoughts about the leak. Now, some people are freaking out. They're like, oh, they already did India in the Chronicles game. Why would they do that again? Well, a lot of these countries around the world, they have a history that expands beyond one specific time period. For instance, Italy, I mean, there was Ezio's time period during the Renaissance, but they also had a little thing, you may have heard of it, called the Roman Empire that started in Italy. Kind of significant part of history, in my opinion. Same thing with England. I mean, obviously you have the colonization period, which we'll be exploring apparently in this India leak. There's also the game we just played had to do with England. There's a lot of stuff that had to do with England. You know, other countries as well. I mean, China's had a pretty long history. Egypt's had a pretty long history. You could set multiple games in one place and explore various parts of that place's history. And I think this specific time period regarding India, and I should really say the Mughal Empire, is pretty important, and I'm really glad that this is something that we may potentially see. Again, it's a leak. Take it with a grain of salt. It's 4chan. Now, it does give us a little bit more of an idea as to what specific period this is going to be. This is going to be apparently in the 17th century, likely to include the Taj Mahal. That would be perfect because the Taj Mahal was built in 1631. So that's, I mean, between then and 1700 would be a great time to set the game. I think another thing that ties into Assassin's Creed and why this could be a really cool place to explore is you also had famous pirates that were out and about during the time of the Mughal Empire. If you don't remember from Uncharted 4, the pirate Henry Avery, he actually raided a Mughal ship in real life, and that's where he got his treasure from. The real pirate, not the one from Uncharted. So there is that, and that was around this time period, I want to say. I don't remember the exact date. I think it was a little bit later in the 17th century, but I mean, we could potentially see that part of the game. That would also lend credence to a potential naval side of things. I hope they don't include it if it's not necessary, but considering the British East India Company and the Dutch East India Company may be a part of this, we might see some naval. So I think those could be some pretty interesting ties between some of the games in the series. Also, just a part of something that I was exploring when doing my video about Loki's family. This isn't really spoilers, but it was really about the Proto-Indo-European mythological parallels. Those are pretty interesting. I don't know if you guys are aware of them. If not, I'll just kind of sum it up for you. So take Jormungandr and Thor and their fight to the end in Ragnarok. Well, that kind of parallel of a sky god who represents storms and a serpent-like figure who represents chaos is actually seen in a lot of mythologies, and this isn't the only one. There's several others. The sky god in general, who's like all-knowing and wise, is something that is seen across a lot of mythologies. Think Zeus, Odin, of course, the Christian god, or I should say the Abrahamic god, depending on which one of those 3 religions you believe in, all kinds of different ones. But take Jormungandr and Thor. There's also Typhon and Zeus, same kind of deal. There's also Ra and Apep in Egypt, almost the exact same thing. God and the Leviathan in the Old Testament, when God tells Job, he's like, I fought the Leviathan, you can't do it, but I can because I'm God, haha. That's an Indo-European parallel. It's a very unique thing, and India, and I should say the Mughal Empire, considering at this point they were a mix of Muslim and Hindu, they would have some of these things in here. And there's a lot of cool stuff that could have to do with ancient Hindu mythology and everything. I don't know if you guys are aware of the Mahabharata, but it's about an ancient war between the gods of Hindu mythology. I don't know all the details, so forgive me if I'm not getting all that right, but there's really like an ancient war between the gods, and that sounds exactly like what happened to the Isu just before the Great Catastrophe. And there's also things like the bridge between Sri Lanka and India that is considered a part of mythology. It's underwater now, but that could be a place where there's an Isu vault or something like that. It could be a bridge to somewhere. It's really cool how these things kind of tie together and how important India could be to the overall story of Assassin's Creed, as well as the idea of colonialism and imperialism and just how Assassin's Creed of a story that would be. And it's one of the things that I really wanted to see when I was doing videos about future settings. And I may do an updated one after, since we're done with Valhalla and everything like that, and just kind of explore more settings that I'd like to see. But I think this could make for a perfect game. Now, the map is huge. It's said to be bigger than Valhalla. That can be good, that can be bad. It depends what they do with it. If they follow the precedent they've had before, it's going to suck because it's just going to be empty shallowness, especially if there's nothing to do in it. If the parkour is the same as it's been the past few games, it's not going to be very fun because it's going to be streamlined into boredom. And I mean, there'd be no point going into these cities, which it looks like the cities are going to have their own regions. There'd be no point in even going into those because the parkour is going to suck, however cool the city might be and however atmospheric it might be. Now, I think with next-gen consoles and the technology, I think we could get some more of the things that we want. Particularly, I mean, we got to start small. Play as an assassin again. I think that's a pretty simple request. Just saying, not just function as an assassin. We've been doing that. I want to be a capital A assassin, as in member of the Assassin Brotherhood in this game, who's taking down the tyranny of colonialism, or explore kind of like a bad guy ending where we explore the dark side of it and kind of what happens when you lose to the Templars. That could be a very interesting premise as well. I don't always want to win in these games. Sometimes I want to lose. I want to see what it's like, you know, have an Infinity War, an Empire Strikes Back kind of game. That could be very interesting. I think if it's set at the beginning of colonialism, that could be something that we see. Now, of course, it all depends on what role we're playing and all that, but another key thing to look at, is this supposed to be next gen only? I guess I should say current gen, so it's not coming to PS4 and Xbox One. I think that makes sense considering if this is the supposed map, that's a pretty large map. Obviously, got the Mughal Empire, you got the British East India Company and the Dutch East India Company. They each look like they have their own region, which of course bounties will not carry across regions. Hopefully this works like the notoriety system from the older games and actually has consequences and you have to take actions to remove those consequences, and not like Odyssey where you go to a menu and hold down a button. Hopefully it works like more realistic and is more like Assassin's Creed and, you know, actually fun to immerse yourself in. So that's it for the India one. I gotta say, of the two, I would prefer the India one, but let's talk about the other one. Now, this one came up about the same time as the India one. They're almost simultaneously gaining traction. Again, doesn't mean they're real. Now, this one is pretty generic. For the first few parts of it, it just talks about stuff you can honestly guess at about the DLCs if you've ever read anything about that period in history and what those events are going to be like. I mean, I already made a video about both of these DLCs, and everything I discuss in those videos is pretty much discussed here, other than specifically Halfdan's return to Ireland. That's it. I mean, seriously, this took guesswork at best. The last part is something else that you can honestly guess at. It's pretty vague about what it is, aside from the fact that it's an Assassin's Creed game set in medieval France and Germany, and it's called Assassin's Creed Champion. Now, this part strikes at my heart because it says it's going to be... I gotta breathe before I say it. It's going to be a classical European fantasy take on the series. Do I really need to talk about how when you're reliving someone's memories in the past and it's supposed to replicate as best as it can, at least immerse you in that kind of a world, and how medieval France and Germany did not actually have fantasy elements to them? Sure, they might have thought that. There was a lot of people who thought witchcraft and stuff was real, but that was misunderstood science. That wasn't a piece of Eden turning someone into a dragon. That you can't just keep coming up with contrived ways to use the pieces of Eden as an excuse to have magic in your games. That it doesn't work that way. No, just stop. Now again, I don't think this one's real. Of the two, this one is definitely the more fake one, in my opinion. Now, I do think that medieval Germany and France, more so Germany, would be really cool kind of settings. I guess it'd be Austria. Where was Martin Luther from? I think he was from Austria. But to see the Reformation, I think would be an excellent game in Assassin's Creed. I think that would be an awesome time period to explore, because obviously you have the Renaissance with Ezio. I think a nice parallel to that would be exploring the Reformation and how the church had so many unjust policies, which I was raised Catholic, so I can say more specifically, trust me, how they have some not so great policies that had influences on the people. I don't know if you're aware of like summoners, and I forget the name of the other one. It's in the Canterbury Tales, but they're essentially people who can go around and say, oh, just pay me a tithe and I can get your family out of hell and you can go to heaven. Like, what? Obviously, Martin Luther was kind of the main figure behind the Reformation and starting his own church. And I think just exploring all the different interpretations of the Bible and how different people kind of split off into various factions and had their own idea, and how certain ones can lead to fanaticism, certain ones lead to more, reasonability, certain ones are stuck with the old ways and how they don't want to leave it. And it can make for a very great assassin versus Templar kind of storyline, as well as contributing to the modern day. Again, I mean, Christianity was a big part of the early games with the Crusades and the Renaissance, and I mean, you literally fight the Pope in at the end of Assassin's Creed 2. I think that's ties into it pretty well. But I think the medieval fantasy take kind of kills everything. And I mean, as much as I want to see like Germany and Gothic architecture and all this cool stuff, just don't do the fantasy take. You've been trying to force this fantasy stuff into these games, and it doesn't work for your more core audience. Sure, I mean, more casual players who just don't care about the title on the box, yeah, of course they think it's fun. It's just a cheap, fun time you can jump into for 5 minutes and jump out. There's nothing to really invest in aside from what level you have or your skill tree. That's not what I come to Assassin's Creed for. It's not what most fans come to it for. And, if I had to guess, I would think that if these were real, I would think it was something like a Rogue and a Unity kind of situation. I think they'll take the assets of the previous games and make it into like a medieval Germany kind of thing and do a little bit more of the RPG style game. And it may add some to like the lore and all that, and that might be interesting, but I think it'll be more of that. And then a full-fledged next-gen game set in India that, I mean, I don't know if they would keep the whole RPG thing or if they would try to bring it more in line with the series identity as a whole. Who knows, honestly? So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, again, I think if either of them are going to be fake, I think the one about Germany is. I would prefer to see the one set in India a little bit more so, just because of the setting. I think it's something that we haven't really explored. And I think the fact that this medieval Germany one is supposedly going to release in early 2022, whereas I think an India one would release in later 2022, I think that also supports that kind of idea that the Germany one would be this kind of bridge between the two. It's, current gen only consoles. And then in late 2022, we get a full-on release of Assassin's Creed India, whatever they're going to name it. I think that could be really cool. Oh yeah, one other thing I want to touch on. There's a single protagonist in Assassin's Creed India. I love that. I don't care what gender, I don't care who they are, as long as they're an assassin. Single, fully written, fully fleshed out protagonist. I love that. I am so happy. That's my favorite part of both of these leaks. So anyway, let me know you guys' thoughts down below. I know this is a little bit more casual video. It's run a little bit longer than I liked it to, but whatever. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts down below. I'll see you guys in the next video.